In March 2020, two words ruled the roost: social distance. It was late in that month when I met a man sitting on the front steps of our mission. And at that time, COVID-19 was still a mystery, leaving fear and panic to take hold across much of our nation. This man I met, Steve, was no exception. I greeted him, and before he could get out his first few words, distress took over. He put his face down to hide his tears, and he just shook his head saying, no one is going to be able to shake hands or hug anyone anymore. He feared the words social distance would become the law and never disappear. I immediately sat beside him, put my hand on his shoulder, assuring him it would be okay. But in a way, I was wrong. In May of 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General released an advisory paper on an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And the statistics are alarming. Poor social connection is associated with an increased risk of heart disease, stroke, depression, and even dementia. Loneliness increases the risk of dying early by 26%. Never has there been a more important time for ministry staff, volunteers, and church members to build meaningful connections with people. But a lot stands in the way of building a real relationship with a guest at a rescue mission or someone in generational poverty who stops by your church or ministry looking for help. What if they manipulate or take advantage of you? What if they say something or act in a way that's offensive? What if they don't want to help themselves? What if they become dependent on you? These are common concerns that can lead us to pass by the person who really needs connection. And that's what boundaries are for. Boundaries foster freedom, dignity, and trust. As you establish boundaries for relationships you form, keep in mind that they're not one way. A boundary is something that applies to both parties. Like a boundary line between two pieces of property applies to both property owners. Whatever boundaries you form will provide that space in your relationship where you know you can go and where you can't. Understanding that with clarity will replace relationship fear with relationship freedom. Inherently, boundaries also communicate expectations. An expectation that your new friend can meet you at that boundary and respect it successfully. Expressing an expectation of successfully maintaining boundaries is a great way to edify a person. Too often, dignity has been lost through cycles of neglect, abuse, and failure. We have an opportunity to help restore dignity when we hold expectations that communicate to an individual, I believe you can do it. And the greatest benefit to a relationship that boundaries can provide is the development of trust. As each person rightly esteems the other, agreements are held and boundaries are respected. Trust builds. Healthy and clear boundaries become the matrix for a trusting relationship to develop because they eliminate ambiguity and question marks that often give rise to doubt and suspicion. Freedom, dignity, and trust are worth pursuing, and boundaries not only help, but they can alleviate the fear factor that holds so many people back from building real relationships with those who need a new friend. And to get this moving forward, I want to leave you with 3 takeaways today. 1 focused on each of our 3 areas: freedom, dignity, and trust. I encourage you, grab a pen, write these down so you can begin putting them into action today. Number 1, for freedom, set a time boundary for your meetings. Start on time, end on time. But within that time frame, allow for freedom. Freedom to laugh, freedom to cry, freedom to open conversation on sensitive topics. But when the time is up, wrap it up. Number 2, for dignity, set a financial boundary. Establishing upfront that you want the relationship to be free of financial assistance or cash exchange will communicate to the person that you have a genuine interest in who he is more than what he needs, and that you recognize in him a person who has the ability to provide for himself. And number 3, for trust, set a confidentiality boundary. Your talks stay between the 2 of you. This boundary allows you to be more vulnerable and to share your own ups and downs. And this will help your friend realize you're human too. And as you extend trust, you'll earn it as well. The worry of a pandemic may have faded, as have the words social distance, but there are still countless people who, like Steve, believe no one will ever really connect with them. Understanding and establishing boundaries can help you, your team members, your volunteers wade into the waters of real relationships, the only real cure to the epidemic of isolation and loneliness. Now let's go out there, fight poverty, and win.